tonight on CBC Vancouver News. An improvement in BC's wildfire situation as the focus shifts to recovery in some parts.
We're not going on the land. We're just going to docks.
What happens next as the smoke begins to clear? Plus, a dramatic rescue.
So I had to trust these guys and walk towards the fire, and I'm glad I did.
A Penticton hiker's harrowing story, trapped in the fire zone for close to 30 hours. And more injuries from an explosion that rocked downtown Prince George.
Your coworker is hurt, but she's alive.
And how so many people rallied to help in the aftermath.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. Significant improvement tonight in BC's wildfire situation. Some of the focus has now shifted to recovery, but with dozens of fires still burning out of control, the province is urging people to obey evacuation orders. In the Okanagan, we're getting a clearer picture of the destruction today. As Renee Filipponi shows us, many are anxiously waiting to go home or at least see the extent of the damage.
The smoke lifted off Okanagan Lake, revealing for the first time to the public the terrible extent of the damage. The fire that scorched the mountainside of West Kelowna left rubble where homes once stood.
We've just visited the west side of Okanagan Lake by boat. It's the only way you can see the damage that's been done by these fires. But residents in the region wanting to know the state of their homes can go online today, put their address in, and get that information.
With the improved visibility, more crews were able to fight from the air. The hope is, as they get control of the fire, the thousands of people still under evacuation order can go home. But the fire chief says before that happens, firefighters need to make sure neighborhoods are safe.
We're looking at debris and hazards that may be on the roads and in the properties.
After being out of their homes for nearly a week, some residents wait at roadblocks for news.
Hoping we get the order to go back home.
This family, who fled with their pets, can see their home has survived, even though almost 100 properties didn't.
I just hope everyone can rebuild as fast as possible. It's just really sad to hear that.
A little emotional today. I've been good up until today, and now I'm starting to fall apart.
It's the unknown that has Susan Priest fearing the worst.
Just beside the brown trees, right?
Yeah.
Just to the left of the brown trees.
Because of the smoke, Priest hasn't been able to see if her home survived until today. She needed help to do it. We offered her a look through our telephoto lens.
There it is.
There it is, eh?
There it is. Thank you. That's standing, yes. That's beautiful news. That's beautiful news. I know it's going to be dirty inside and all of that, but we know neighbors that have lost their homes, so we just feel very blessed.
Renee Filipponi, CBC News, West Kelowna.
A nice ending for sure. All right, rain and cooler temperatures in the Shuswap region meant clearer skies and calm waters on the lakes. Today, boaters took advantage of the conditions to deliver supplies to communities still under evacuation order. Our John Hernandez went along for the ride to survey some of the damage and speak with residents on the front lines.
Another day, another supply run. This dock in Chase, east of Kamloops, a hub for donations to be boated across the Shuswap Lake.
We're not going on the land. We're just going to docks.
Chase resident Kelly Esslinger agreed to take us on one of his runs to the burning North Shore, where many people have defied provincial evacuation orders.
How do you balance that? How do you balance what you're hearing from sort of the officials, but then your eagerness to get materials to people that have stayed behind?
Well, really, at the end of the day, I don't think we're doing anything wrong. We're just taking supplies by boat to residents that are in a lot worse situation that we are in.
Along the way, a glimpse at some of the destruction and horror. Deserted pumps run from burned down houses to the water, a sign that people tried to save their homes but fled. We're on Little River that runs through Squilax. The fire tore through this area on Friday, and we heard stories of residents having to seek shelter underneath this bridge right here. The loss is visible on both sides of the water near the Little Shuswap Lake First Nation.
It's devastating because you know the people. and the band members, and you don't know how long it's going to take to get them back into a home.
For the past few days, fuel and generators have been dropped off here in Lee Creek.
And a huge shout out to, a lot of people that are volunteering their time.
Received by residents defying evacuation orders.
I don't know if my house would be here if I wasn't here. And I built that house from scratch, and that would be quite devastating to me.
Forester and former firefighter Jason Workington has been on the front lines for days. He says locals here have actively been working with wildfire crews.
Well, there's not a lot of them out here, but the level of collaboration has been great. There's been lots of collaboration going on. Like I say, they've been working with the locals to provide a little education and strategies.
The province says there's about 200 firefighters across the region and maintains that defying orders isn't safe. A message heard and declined by these residents as they do what they think is best. John Hernandez, CBC News, Chase.
And a change in tone and tactics today from the BC government when it comes to the many people who stayed behind in the Shuswap area to fight the fire. A promise now to collaborate and work together. Justin McElroy joins me live. We told you yesterday, our audience, about the widespread criticism from those on the ground. Justin, what's changed today?
Yeah, well, it seemed that something in the government changed because certainly the day after both Premier David Eby toured a lot of these evacuee centers and plenty of stories about people on the ground in the Shuswap being upset with the government, giving lots of lists of what not to do and not saying ways that collaboration could happen, we saw a lot of different changes in rhetoric. First, let's take a listen to what Premier David Eby had to say this morning when CBC News Network put the question to him.
There's a lot of folks there with a lot of knowledge of the local conditions of the bush. Lots of people who worked in the forest industry who have expertise with heavy equipment. Many people who may have worked in firefighting themselves. And so I know it's tough and I know it's challenging, but really asking people to work with the wildfire service, not against it.
They still want people to follow the instructions. They're still saying, let's not make this an us versus them situation. But there's more of an acknowledgement of the skill set in the area and trying to have rhetoric that makes people more, if not at least excited about the wildfire service being in their communities, accepting and wanting to see positive developments.
Okay, so that's the change in tone, but what about any tactical changes?
Yeah, and that might be coming as well. One of the big things was, of course, people who stayed behind were told that they couldn't help once BC Wildfire Service was in place. They had to stay in place in their homes and not move around. Well, now the BC Wildfire Service says they're open to doing what they've done in past wildfires as well, which is to have people who were volunteers join in paid positions for the duration of fighting this fire.
We do want to ensure from a safety perspective and from the tactics that we have on the ground that we are working in a unified way. And so those are the conversations that we started last night. We're going to continue today to see if we can come to an understanding of what that's going to look like to work together to try to protect the areas in the North Shuswap and beyond as that fire continues to move forward.
So emphasis on together there. Certainly BC Wildfire Service wants to make sure that the government is in charge in this situation and that everyone is accounted for. But you can tell today from a lot of different hints that the government is a little bit more receptive to some of the criticisms on the ground than maybe they had been the previous couple days.
Justin McElroy reporting live tonight. Thank you. Well, dozens more people have been told to leave their homes as a result of the latest evacuation order in the Lytton First Nation. Last night, an order was expanded to 8 more of the nation's reserves as strong winds fueled the Stein Mountain wildfire, burning 12 kilometers northwest of Lytton. It comes after another order earlier in the day applied to 4 of the nation's reserves. Several areas in the Fraser Canyon are under evacuation orders because of both the Stein Mountain fire and the larger Kakisa Creek wildfire south of Lytton. That one is burning out of control at an area estimated around 136 square kilometers. A Penticton hiker is sharing his harrowing story this week after being trapped in the fire zone in a remote and massive mountain park. Bernard Cloutier waited close to 30 hours for rescue as an aggressive wildfire encroached on his position. Brady Strachan has his story of survival and rescue.
This is my ticket to safety. I'm going to keep this forever. That little piece of paper saved my life.
A small slip of paper that holds so much meaning for backcountry hiker Bernard Cloutier. A message dropped to him by a rescue helicopter with life-saving instructions.
So I had to trust these guys and walk towards the fire, and I'm glad I did, because I would most certainly be dead given what happened in the hours that followed.
Last week, Cloutier was on the cusp of completing a 3-week solo trek in the majestic Cathedral Provincial Park in the Similkameen, when he saw a massive plume of gray smoke, the aggressive Crater Creek fire burning towards him.
I found this cloud rampaging uphill just a few hundred meters from me, and right there and then I knew I was in grave danger.
Cloutier used his satellite phone to connect with park officials as he hunkered down for close to 30 hours waiting for rescue.
Frankly, I'm not sure my heart can take it, but with the love of God, I will make it through. Okay, I think I hear a helicopter coming.
Ron Burley was on the helicopter trying to find Cloutier in smoky conditions and mountainous terrain.
The original location we were given was not accurate, so we did spend some time searching for him at the location that we were given, and we could not find him.
The job was made easier when Cloutier activated the SOS function on his sat phone to pinpoint his location. But with no place to land nearby, Burley dropped the note with instructions to head back on the trail towards the fire.
And he wasn't really expecting to go that way, but he did follow the instructions, and that was important as well.
With exhaustion setting in, Cloutier hiked back through an area already burned. After a few kilometers, he reached Burley and another rescuer who guided him to where the helicopter had landed.
It would have been a difficult situation for him alone up the valley with where that fire ended up going.
Today, Cloutier is reflecting on the ordeal. He's grateful for the volunteers at Penticton Search and Rescue and says there's no doubt they saved his life.
Absolutely, without a doubt. You know, the next day I was going to die in a raging fire and turn into bacon for bears. There's not a doubt in my mind.
Brady Strachan, CBC News, Penticton.
A Kelowna family who watched their home get saved by fire crews on a doorbell camera have managed to thank the team who stopped their house from burning down. The family is now safe on Vancouver Island after being forced from their home on Thursday night in West Kelowna.
Sirens nonstop flying past our street, and my husband's screaming, "Get the kids, get in the car, let's go!" And everybody was like mass exodus out of our neighborhood.
The West Kelowna residents happen to have close family in central Saanich, which is where the firefighters are from. That meant they were able to go down to the fire station and show the crews their appreciation. Now, this harrowing wildfire season has left winemakers in the Okanagan growing increasingly worried. While they say smoke taint isn't expected to be an issue for this vintage, they are seeing the profound effects of climate change on their farms.
Wine is not just alcohol. Wine speaks of a piece of land. There's so much variety, there's so much interest from tourism and from the world of wine in what we do here, because it is such a diverse environment to grow grapes and to make wine. We can make all sorts of different things up and down the valley. Although you look out behind me and there's a full vineyard out there, it's a little bit of an Easter egg hunt for grapes at the moment, because we all suffered pretty catastrophic winter damage.
We have been seeing the effects of climate change, whether it's a freeze event, whether it's an atmospheric river, or whether it's a heat dome, or now what we're seeing today, fires, is really indicative of climate change and how it's impacting our wineries and grape growers.
The smoke sitting in the vineyard certainly isn't a positive. We've been dealing with this for a while now. There's lots of research going on at different universities around the world. The AWRI, Australian Wine Research Institute, has done a lot of work on smoke and smoke mitigation, when it's caused, how it's caused, and then how to deal with it. And it looks like this year, we might need to use some of those techniques.
The smoke is impacting the industry probably more directly in keeping tourists away. We've had smoke for a number of years, and people just are starting to expect it, and they're planning, or probably not planning, to come to the Okanagan because of it.
We really encourage people to come back in the fall. We're looking at a really nice fall from what the long-term forecast says. So once the smoke is cleared, then it's going to be a beautiful September, October, we believe, and a wonderful place to come back and visit us. As a wine industry are going to need that support. Buying local is more important than ever as a tourism destination once you're able.
All right, time now to check in with Darius Madavi for a first look at the weather. Darius, first, before you get into that, we're actually getting a look at the weather that forest fires can create themselves. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I would love to, because this is a really, really interesting topic. Now, fires can generate their own weather in a lot of different ways, and that can be really problematic because the heat that the fires generate causes that air to rise, and then new air rushes in to replace that air, causing winds, and so it allows the fires to cause themselves to spread. But they can also do even more dramatic things. So if you take a look at this video that the members of the BC Wildfire Service took, you can see what looks like a fire tornado. It's not technically a tornado. Officially, it's called a fire whirl, but it's created by similar things. You need really strong winds. You need the heat from that fire. So you need an extremely massive and powerful wildfire. You need instability in the atmosphere. And so last week, which is when this video was taken, we saw the perfect conditions for one come through when that cold front swept through, bringing gusty winds, bringing the massive change in temperature, that atmospheric instability that we need to see that fire whirl. But they're also very dangerous. They can spread burning, flaming matter very far away and start new spot fires. So definitely something to be on the lookout for, but not something we're likely to see again anytime soon. They're extremely rare. Also rare, apparently this year, rain in the southern interior. We did see some earlier, now that's gone, but we have a severe rainfall warning in place for the South Peace region because we're seeing some extremely significant rainfall there, expecting anywhere from 70 to 90 millimeters over the next couple hours. We already saw some, but still happening and into Alberta. So you can see that system sort of pass through here, an extremely powerful system that you can pick up really strongly on the radar. Over the next 24 hours or so, we'll continue seeing that rain in the region, but moving over into Alberta for the most part. Here in the south, where we'd really hope to see that rain, it doesn't look like much more. We're really drying up. Maybe some trace amounts in the Shuswap, but it looks like Kelowna has hit its rainy period and is back to those dry conditions for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Darius. We're learning more tonight about that massive explosion in Prince George and the way everyday people who found themselves near the blast zone rallied to help those who were injured. As Michelle Gazoub reports, a full picture of just how many are hurt is still emerging.
As you can see, it's a lot quieter here today, but there are still cleanup efforts underway and a huge pile of burnt debris left over from yesterday's explosion. Today, we're learning more about those terrifying moments just after the explosion around 7 a.m. when the people who happened to be in this area essentially acted as first responders trying to help the people who were hurt.
So 7 in the morning, we were in the back dressing donuts and finishing off the morning bake. The impact of the explosion slammed our back door, and my mother and brother thought that it was maybe the garbage truck had dropped a dumpster. I haven't been in an explosion before, but I've experienced a snap earthquake, which is very similar to what I felt. And there were people running towards the building, there were people inside the building walking out, and it was just a lot of chaos in the moment. We were just trying to get paramedics down here because we knew somebody would be hurt. If it had been 45 minutes later in the day, more people would have been hurt, and it's a miracle that it wasn't. There was somebody pulled out of the blast area, and they were administering first aid to her on the sidewalk out here. And there was another city worker who was in the park behind us, and she was on the phone, but I could tell she was upset. And I said, are you okay? Are you hurt? And she said, no, I'm on the phone with my boss, but somebody was in the explosion. I said, okay, your coworker is hurt, but she's alive. And she's just like, she's okay. I'm like, she's hurt. And she sort of collapsed on the ground. So we had her come in and sit down. And then another one of her coworkers came up and we had her sit down. They were very much having panic attacks. So I waved the paramedics over and they brought in oxygen and had them settled. We gave them water and juice. And it was a rallying point, whereas all the paramedics and fire officials were up on the other streets rallying there to organize to fight the fire.
We have to get access to the building before we'll know the full scope. So we can see the outside of the building, and it's pretty clear that the west wall has been damaged extensively. The fire got up inside the cladding of the building. So we'll have to wait and see what the full impact was. Fortunately, it happened early in the morning and there was nobody on site. You know, we teach our Master of Engineering programs in here. There's a lot of research being led out of this building on some really great technological advances in engineering. We're incredibly grateful that nobody was killed. You know, we're a part of this community. We're a part of the Northern British Columbia community. So when people get hurt in incidents like this, our university community's heart goes out to them, their families, their friends, and we wish them, of course, nothing but the best.
We're also learning new information about the number of people that might have been injured yesterday, hearing from a local nonprofit uniting northern drug users that they treated at least 10 unhoused people that were in the area yesterday. We've also had confirmation the city worker that was injured yesterday is now in stable condition. But what we don't know is just how long it is going to take to clean up this massive amount of debris that is still left over. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Prince George.
The mother of a 13-year-old girl found dead in a Burnaby park 6 years ago has taken the witness stand at the murder trial of her daughter's accused killer. Testifying in Mandarin and through an interpreter, the mother said she would take her daughter skating and swimming. The girl would spend summer afternoons looking at her cell phone or doing crafts. She was also learning to play the flute and would sometimes go jogging. The mother repeatedly wept at the mention of the girl's name during the trial. The defendant, Ibrahim Ali, has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. On Vancouver Island, a ceremony thought to be the first of its kind in Canada. Nearly 20 acres of land has been given back to the Sartlip and Tsaykum First Nations. A celebration for the land transfer happened last week for an area in central Saanich, more commonly known as Maber Flats. It's a natural wetland, but years ago was drained and turned into productive farmland. The family who owned and farmed parts of the land, where they have now transferred 18.5 acres to Saanich Leadership Council, which includes the 2 First Nations. The exchange happened through a federal program that promotes conservation. Saanich leaders say they plan to restore the area to wetlands and revive traditional harvesting and cultural practices. Well, prevention is better than cure. After the break, our live interview, we talked to an expert advocating for more to be done to stop wildfires from starting. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Our noon show on radio, BC Today, had another 3-hour live special co-hosted by our Dan Bird and our Belle Puri. One of the people who called into the show was a firefighter, Kim from Vancouver. Take a listen.
So I fought forest fires for 7 years in Ontario, Northern Ontario to be exact. So my opinion is coming from some experience. And I wanted to let everyone listening know that with the conditions that we had in BC this summer, when you add 50-kilometer-an-hour winds to that, absolutely nothing can stop the fire. Nothing. So it doesn't matter if you have 17 water bombers. It doesn't matter if you have buckets from helicopters. The winds propel the heat, and nothing can happen. You can't stop it. And so these people who are staying home thinking that their garden hose is going to have some effect, I mean, I'm actually surprised there weren't more deaths in this situation, because that is extraordinarily dangerous.
Kim, we know we heard from wildfire information officers who were telling us at one point, one of the blazes, and perhaps Justin or Belle can remind me which one it was. It might have been the Adams Lake complex. Forest Tower told us that it moved 20 kilometers in half a day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yes. And you can't. You know, the thing is, the water that's falling from the bombers or the helicopters, it's evaporating before it gets to the trees. Like the heat is so intense that you can't stop it. And with winds that strong, I mean, I understand people want to save their homes, and I understand that it's a frustrating situation, but they're risking their life. They're literally risking their life doing that when the situation was what it was. It's really quite horrific how fast that can go.
Let's go back to our top story now in BC's wildfire situation. Bob Gray is a wildland fire ecologist, and he says our situation in the province that we're facing has been a long time coming, and a lot more prevention will help us, but that will take work. Bob joins me live now from Chilliwack. Bob, the last week and a half has been a difficult one for British Columbians living through these fires and watching the destruction. Also for the rest of the province, just, sitting back and looking at all of this. Do you think any of this could have been prevented?
I think on a large scale, it could have been prevented, especially around communities. I was part of the Filman report back in 2004, and we identified a number of key recommendations that, if applied at the appropriate scale, would have had a significant impact on fire-threatening communities and key infrastructure.
What are some of those recommendations that you think should have been put into place that weren't?
Well, certainly policy shifts and incentives to help the industry thin out the low-value timber, the small diameter trees and thick, dense forests that need a subsidy. They can't be treated because of the low merchantability. And things like prescribed burning, dealing with tenure system, all these various incentives that would have enabled us to move on a larger area more quickly and dealt with the fuels at proper scale.
It seems like this comes up every fire season, and clearly we've been talking about it since 2003. Prescribed burning is also something we hear a lot about from various First Nations as well. Why is it that we aren't doing this work?
Well, part of the problem is funding. You need very consistent, stable funding to build up the capacity in the workforce to do it. There are service policy issues in the way. The ministry will only train and certify their own people. They won't train anybody from industry or First Nations groups. So that becomes problematic. There's various permits that we have to go through to get things. It often takes a year or more to get through the permitting process to get something done. So there's all kinds of issues there. And then we've just lost capacity. Prior to the mid-1990s, BC was burning over 100,000 hectares a year, and we just don't have those key people with the skill set to do it anymore. So it's going to take time to ramp up, but lots of barriers in the way of doing more prescribed burning for sure.
Yeah, I imagine cost is a barrier as well, but how does that compare to the price of fighting these fires year after year?
Well, that's a very good point. The cost of doing the mitigation at scale that we talk about always comes up, and we're talking billions of dollars to do that. But these fire seasons they're 10 billion plus fire seasons. I mean, at the end of this year, the province will release a figure on what the suppression costs were, and it'll be $800 million or something. Well, the real costs are anywhere from 6 to 26 times that. So, I mean, the EU just announced that their fire seasons are 21 billion euro fire seasons every year. So in the US their fire seasons are 75 to $310 billion a year. So ours are definitely in that range. And so it doesn't make sense to use the excuse that it's going to cost too much up front when on the back end it's costing us 10 times more. So we we can't use that excuse anymore.
Wildland Fire ecologist Bob Gray, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
The man who led a coup against Putin might be dead. The latest on a plane crash near Moscow and the Wagner chief who may have been on board. It's next.
New development is springing up in New Westminster. Suddenly, the city has a skyline. And this is the place to be. What do you think of New Westminster?
It's a good place to live.
Why did you move here?
Convenience. It was centralized. I could get to anywhere I want to by bus before. It used to be about 6-7 years ago. But just a nice central place.
Is this a good place to live?
Oh, yes. The best. The best. I've lived here for 47 years.
Wouldn't move?
No. No.
Well, I had a motorcycle shop here about 7 years ago, and this was all really drab, and there wasn't really anything to draw people down here at all. And now it seems to be a lot more lively, and there's the shops and the new hotel going up. It really changes it. It makes it a pleasure to come down.
It wasn't always that way. New West was booming in the 50s and early 60s. Columbia Street was the miracle mile, setting retail trading records. The shipyards were flourishing. And when the first shovel went into the ground for the Royal Towers Hotel, it seemed nothing could stop the city's growth. But it all fell apart. The shipyards couldn't keep up with technology, and the #1 highway bypassed the city. Now, the highway is back, on rails. Mayor Tom Baker calls SkyTrain a new artery to an old heart.
If you bypass a city with a highway, then the business community disappears from that city. So we've put a SkyTrain downtown New Westminster, and it's part of the regional town centre, and it's business community to business community. It gives people an opportunity to travel better, and it brings people to our city.
Baker says today's development is the result of a 13-year plan to bring the city back to life. It has even meant construction of a new hotel, the Inn at Westminster Quay, the first hotel to be built in New West since the Royal Towers in the early 60s. And the waterfront's alive again, with the Westminster Quay as the centerpiece. Soon, the whole area will look like this. So have you had a lot of retailers, a lot of businesses wanting to locate here?
In fact, in the hotel, we've had to turn away people. You know, we've had our pick, basically, of who we want to come in there, what services we want. Specifically, if you want a particular type of jewelry sold, we would just ask for it, and we'd get proposals in, and you can just pick which tenants do you want, and then you have them.
Of course, there is still a way to go. The Miracle Mile is more like a nickel and dime street these days, but officials say it, too, will soon be back to its former glory. Connie Monk, CBC News, New Westminster.
Residents of the Northwest Territory's smallest town say they are surprised and concerned that many of them didn't get the message when they were ordered to leave. Some of the 40 residents of the Kakisa still remain in the community despite communications being down and a nearby fire still being a threat. Juanita Taylor has their story.
The streets of Kakisa are empty now that most of its 40 residents have left. An evacuation delayed, explains the chief.
No, we didn't hear about it. We didn't know until we'd seen on the TV.
An evacuation order was issued for Kakisa on August 17, but people here didn't learn about it that day. That's because their telecommunication system was down.
We didn't see no smoke and no fire, so there was no emergency at the time.
Evacuees from Kakisa were expected in Fort Simpson, 320 kilometers away. After 24 hours when no one was showing up, the mayor of Fort Providence, an hour's drive to Kakisa, was asked to check what was going on.
I drove down and I talked to them, and they said, well, no one told them they're supposed to evacuate.
Turns out the fire had destroyed the fiber optic line that Kakisa relies on for internet, cell service, and phone lines.
We've basically been on our own since, and we've been through this before, so we know the signs to watch out for and that kind of stuff.
The wildfire of 2014 came very close to burning Kakisa to ashes. This one is 14 kilometers away, and a handful of residents aren't leaving, including Ryan Moore.
I'm not going away.
He's chosen to stay and to try to protect his community.
We're doing some fire breaks here, and there's not many people around town, so we only have limited labor around here. It's a small community, so just do my part.
Caroline Wozniak is the territory's finance minister.
That's what brought us down last Sunday. We didn't have the redundancy. It's something that we continue to push for so that we can find the funding to get there.
Northwest Tel, the telecommunications provider, says it's working to restore service to Kakisa. Those who stayed behind are keeping their eyes on the sky. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Kakisa, Northwest Territories.
A plane crashed after leaving Moscow today, and Russian authorities are saying Yevgeny Prigozhin was listed as a passenger on board. It's still not clear if he actually was on the plane. Prigozhin is the leader of the Wagner Group, a private army which rebelled against Russia's military leadership in June. Amateur video shows what appeared to be the plane crash. The Russian state news agency says all 10 people on board were killed and 8 bodies have been found. Russian President Vladimir Putin appeared to let Prigozhin off easy in June after the revolt he orchestrated seemed to fizzle. Commentators said that uprising was the most serious challenge to Putin's leadership since he first became president. An historic moment for space exploration. India becomes the 4th nation to land a spacecraft on the moon and the first to reach the lunar South Pole. What it means next.
Overnight rainfall on Sunday significantly helped the firefighting effort, so much so that the plan of attack has now changed. So almost 5 millimeters of rain fell on the fire that is threatening Yellowknife. In that city alone, the city recorded up to 10 millimeters in some areas. So that plus the winds are helping. They shifted several times on Monday, but forecasters hoped that the winds actually push the fire west, which will make the fire reaching the city pretty unlikely. All of that is helping change the plan of attack. So now, rather than just trying to make sure that the fire doesn't get to Yellowknife, fire officials say that they're looking at trying to extinguish that fire that is more than 167,000 hectares. We're talking more than 40 kilometers of hot wildfire. Now that change is something that is good news for those evacuees that are spread out across the West. More than 19,000 people were forced from their homes because of all these fires in the Northwest Territories. Some are in Vancouver, in Winnipeg. In Calgary alone, almost 2,500 people are in that city, and thousands are in Edmonton.
As can be expected, it's quite a lot of people. I mean, Yellowknife is, 20,000. Hay River is 3,000 to 4,000 people. Plus you have Fort Smith as well. So as you can imagine, it's a lot of people to take care of, and they're doing the best they can with the resources that they have.
As for when these thousands of evacuees can come back, that is still very much unknown. The mayor of Yellowknife and other school divisions in that city say it's very unlikely that students will be going back to school on their original start date, August 28th, just a week from Monday. And so because of all of that and this still unsafe situation, the mayor of Yellowknife says it is too soon to tell when people can come back to their homes.
To date, the fire is still a threat, and we don't have a date for when folks can come back.
Though the fire evacuation deadline has passed, it was Friday at noon, Yellowknife's mayor is still urging people who can leave to do so. She says there are about 2,600 people in Yellowknife still. Now, about 1,000 of those are essential workers, but the capacity in the city to do something in case there is an emergency is very, very low. So if you have not left Yellowknife yet, the mayor says now is the time to go. Because even though there are these favorable weather conditions at the moment, the situation is still unsafe. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Regina.
India has made history today by landing a spacecraft on the south pole of the moon. It's the first country to do that. And as Salima Shivji tells us, the mission could put India at the forefront of lunar research.
And we are nearing and approaching the lunar surface.
India's space mission control tense and alert as its landing rover inched closer and closer to the moon's south pole, a notoriously difficult maneuver on rough terrain. While a nation held its breath, watching in nervous anticipation and excitement, praying for a successful landing for Chandrayaan-3. And it was flawless, India's space agency said, as pure joy and relief spread through the control room.
We have achieved soft landing on the moon. India is on the moon.
A big win for India's space program and the country's reputation, 4 years after its first try failed and mere days after Russia's competing attempt to race to the moon's south crash-landed. For India, the mission marks its arrival as a powerhouse in space exploration.
This success belongs to all of humanity, and it will help moon missions by other countries in the future.
For the global science community, it's a chance to explore the enticing unknown.
This is showing the South Pole with a number of craters.
Craters that scientists think are storing frozen water that could lead to a future settlement on the moon.
It seems there's a lot of water present in this area, and so a great possibility to exploit in situ.
This mission is historic. Not only is India a developing nation, now the first country to reach the moon's south pole, its space agency has done it on a much smaller budget than other countries.
A feat that was celebrated in the streets. The expectation is that India's moon landing will boost the country's burgeoning private space sector and inspire future generations to dream about space and all of its possibilities. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
Huge news for India. Darius Madhavi joins us now with the moon forecast, right, Darius?
Oh, I wish, but this only shows the Earth, unfortunately. This is the best I can do. We can look at sort of the satellite imagery of where we saw a lot of these really hot temperatures. We can look at the temperatures really staying suppressed in the southern interior for the most part. A lot of it is because of that system that moved through, kept temperatures down. Part of it also because of the smoke in a lot of these places, some of that smoke being carried away, and also because of that system moving through. Tomorrow, we're going to expect a lot of these temperatures to come back up. So getting closer to seasonal tomorrow in a lot of the places in the southern interior. You can expect that heading into the weekend, we'll see those temperatures back a couple degrees, maybe 3 to 5 degrees above seasonal once again. So not a heat wave like we saw earlier last week, but temperatures will come up once more. Now, if we take a look at this map here, we can see maybe it was going to be a smoke forecast, but I can tell you that the smoke, if this ever works, is going to be moving towards Vancouver, and it's not working. Oh, well, the smoke is going to be moving towards Vancouver. We're going to get smokier skies here in Vancouver for a couple days at least. We have a low pressure system setting up over this part of the coast, and it's going to sort of drag some of that smoke our way. It won't be as smoky as it was earlier this week. That was because we had winds blowing from the east, really pushing that smoke. Here we just have it sort of drifting our way, so less smoky than it was earlier this week, but a bit of it returning once again. And so if we take a look, if anything works, no, I might not have any graphics, so I'm just going to tell you what we're looking at. We're looking at, there we go, temperatures tonight staying relatively low, below seasonal, even for overnight temperatures, still suppressed. Lots of cloud through the province. It's not until tomorrow we see some of that cloud starting to clear up, and I really don't know what's happening. But some of that cloud's starting to clear up. Here we go. Still a bit in the north. We're going to see that sort of clearing trend happening, moving from the south to the north, heading into the weekend. Still a little bit of rain only in the northwest, but only very briefly, just in the morning. And for the most part, we're looking pretty sunny as temperatures do climb once again. So it should be a fairly nice weekend to get outside. Tonight in Vancouver, again, seasonal temperatures, a bit of cloud clearing up for a sunny day tomorrow, which is really the trend that we're seeing for the foreseeable future. Yeah, I really don't know. There's no rain tomorrow. You can ignore that. There's something happening with the graphic system.
You're getting
I'm sorry,
a sign
but
from the moon,
imagine
Darius.
this part. Yeah, I should have done a moon forecast. It probably would have gone smoother, but really just sun. You can ignore the rain there.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, in response to record wildfires across North America, some are investing in what's being called climate-resilient homes. Now, researchers say the homes are better equipped to withstand extreme weather events. Earlier this summer, I got to visit parts of California where people are building with some of these new designs.
Good morning.
So this flame is 1,500 degrees Celsius?
Yes, that's right.
An experiment in the future of construction, pitting one material against another. The result is almost instant.
So see here how flames come up here.
The wood block on the right catches fire in a matter of seconds. The other one is virtually unscathed. So the question is, if you live somewhere with a wildfire risk, which do you want your house to be made of? The one you probably picked uses a 10,000-year-old technique.
So it should be sticky and it should not fall apart by itself.
So it's really simple. It smells like dirt, it looks like dirt,
yes.
Feels like dirt. That's because it is dirt, mixed with a chemical stabilizer or cement to make it water resistant. Researchers at the University of California, Davis are studying compressed earth block construction with the hope that you can extract the material for free from the site you're building on. The idea is that you can rent a machine like this to build your house.
Yes.
So somebody does have to get their hands a little dirty.
Yeah.
About a minute later, the machine produces these.
And then it's gonna make block out of it.
Strong enough for a 2-story building, says Dr. Nitin Kumar, and affordable because of the material involved.
It is not even the fire resistant, it is non-combustible.
It's not fire resistant, it's fireproof, windproof, earthquake-proof.
Yes.
That's a tall order for this brick.
Yes.
But you're confident in it.
Yes, yes.
The idea is still in its infancy, but it's part of a growing body of science around building homes that can withstand what climate change is throwing our way. To find out more, we've come deep into the mountains of Northern California, where crews are working to build what they call a fully wildfire-resilient home. Its design may not be everyone's cup of tea, but for those already devastated by disaster, safety is first and foremost. Vern, you're building these Q cabins, these houses. You're not saying they're 100% fireproof, but sort of?
Right, we don't really use that word. What we do is we build a structure that is 100% non-combustible.
So this is all. Vern Sneed uses steel as the main construction material on his Quonset huts. Instead of hammering nails into wood, the house is welded together. Even the framing avoids conventional materials that can catch fire.
So this is called rock-on.
In favor of this.
And it is a layer of concrete board, a layer of insulation, and a layer of concrete board. And so both sides of this are resistant to fire.
So if you were to take a blowtorch to this, to the steel, what would happen?
You would find that it does not catch on fire.
None of Sneed's Quonset huts have been tested in an actual wildfire, but steel only melts at very high temperatures and doesn't spread flames. When the house that originally sat here was flattened by a blaze in 2019, a similar Quonset garage on the property was the only structure on the entire hillside left standing. Enough evidence for the owners to call Sneed days later to start their rebuild.
A Quonset hut being a curve, if the fire is approaching the curve, the building is fading away from the fire. So that's a real advantage when the fire is approaching a building, to have the building sloping away. We don't show an overhang. We have an overhang, but it's all steel. So there is no soffit venting, no way for any fire to get into an attic.
The cost, he says, is pretty similar to a regular build while being mold and insect free too. I mean, it sounds like the perfect place to live. So why aren't more people building like this?
You know, this is Northern California, number one. We have a huge wood industry. Wood is relatively inexpensive here, so it's hard to compete. But at the same time, what is the cost of a house that, that burns down and the rebuilding of it?
A question people in regions at risk of wildfire all over North America are grappling with. We're heading now to look at some more ways that people are building fire-resilient homes. Northern California is no stranger to wildfires. It has seen several in the last decade that have destroyed communities, including the town of Paradise. A lot of people in the area believe it's a matter of when, not if, another fire comes through and ravages another town, so they're vowing to be prepared.
Heavenly Father, please help us.
The Camp Fire leveled the town in 2018, killing 85 people and destroying almost 19,000 buildings. Most of them were older and built before any sort of wildfire standards had been introduced in California. Today, just 10% of what burned has been rebuilt, but the town now has some of the strictest fire building codes in the U.S.
The Paradise Camp Fire wrecked our world, burned my house down, took everything from us in a blink of an eye.
Flames tore through Gary Ledbetter's home just 10 days after he and his wife had moved in. Refusing to ever be a victim again, he's taken drastic measures in the new construction on his old site, setting another example for communities at risk.
Anything that's a weak point on this envelope of the building is an entry point for a ruthless fire.
Ledbetter has gone above and beyond the Paradise and state regulations for building in a wildfire zone, earning his property a first-of-its-kind designation from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. IBHS spent more than a decade testing materials and designs against a wall of embers, allowing researchers to create a standard for what they call a wildfire-prepared home. And I see a sprinkler up there.
Yep, I have a sprinkler. I have a network of sprinklers on the rooftop.
This home is built far beyond what's now considered safe, with the highest standard in fire-resistant roofing and those sprinklers mounted on top. Vents stopping embers from getting into the attic, a 3-layer stucco siding, and double-pane windows. There's also a large amount of space between his house and anything that can catch fire. He's even got the smallest details covered.
See that wrapping around that pipe? This is fireproof material, and this is what they use on the exhaust pipes of motorcycles. That's not a requirement.
But it all comes back to how much this costs. Ledbetter knows not everyone can afford to do all of this. He says governments need to ante up to help.
Policy. Go for policy. I guarantee you, if the government could say, I'll give you this much money if you qualify to replace these windows, replace the siding, do something to make your house more resilient, that is cheaper than letting it burn and then losing a whole township. It's cheaper to proactively invest in people's homes.
It was one of the first computers to break into the mainstream. Why a Montreal family is celebrating after finding some vintage VIC-20s. Next.
Hi, I'm Anita, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Support sustainable agriculture and celebrate local food with Margaret Gallagher at Feast of Fields. Enjoy the Gourmet Harvest Festival at the Stable Harvest Farms on September 10th. Tickets at farmfolkcityfolk.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
Well, it was the first home computer to sell more than 1 million units when it debuted more than 40 years ago. And while it's a safe bet no one is using the Commodore VIC-20 anymore, there's still a market for them with nostalgia buffs. Now, as Kwabena Aduro reports, a Montreal family has come across a treasure trove of the machines very unexpectedly.
This is the attic crawl space Sandrine Campeau discovered in her home only days ago. She only found it because her roof needs repairs after last month's major rainstorm.
There was water coming, it was like a waterfall coming in through all of the areas of the house. And I never want to go through that again.
But it was what she found inside that surprised her the most.
Oh my gosh, look at this.
Commodore VIC-20 computers, many of them still in their original boxes.
We had to remove a whole bunch of bags and stuff that was there from the previous owner. And my husband came across all these garbage bags, and inside were boxes of Commodore.
Apparently there are more computers in the attic. I'm going to go find out. Okay, so there are about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 computers that I counted. In total, the family says that they have about 18. But once they bring all these computers down, they'll have a better estimate of how many computers they have in total.
Because they have all different functions.
For Campeau, they have brought back memories.
Red, white. Oh my God, this was the first computer that I ever had when I was young. We used to play these, like the tennis space game. And it had like a little sort of connector. It was almost like a cassette that you put in and you would play the video games through there.
Others on social media are also sharing their recollections of these computers that need to be hooked up to a TV to work.
You were a genius, you were programming, but today kids learn that in school, or you can learn how to code online. But at that time, it was new, it was fun, it was powerful. You were a programmer.
Denis Talbot used a Commodore VIC-20 when he worked as a VJ at Music Plus and says he might like to get his hands on one.
But for now, I hope that the lady gets a great price for all her machines, maybe enough to pay the damage on the roof.
Campeau says that's exactly what she's hoping to do. Kwabena Aduro, CBC News, Montreal.
And finally, we're ending with some good news out of West Kelowna tonight. An unexpected wildfire survivor that's getting the royal treatment. This is Pumbaa, the pet pig getting hand-fed by firefighters. His owners had to flee as flames engulfed the Broken Rail Ranch last Thursday, but Pumbaa and his sister, Miss Wilbur, were stubborn and refused to load into their trailer. And the family was devastated. Miss Wilbur did not survive, but firefighters spotted Pumbaa and even threw him granola bars from their chopper. Since then, they've gone back to feed him water, apples, and yes, more granola bars. Maybe not the popular opinion, but I say what a cutie. Glad he survived. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Have a wonderful evening.